Today we're going to continue with our new unit on the emergence of modern America. When we met in class, we talked about African Americans in the postbellum South, the development of Jim Crow laws, the Supreme Court ruling in Plessy versus Ferguson, and the idea that separate but equal did not violate the 14th Amendment. Today we're going to take a look at westward migration and the experience of settlers who will move into the vast region between the Mississippi River and the Pacific Ocean in the post-war period. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, economic opportunity, industrialization, technological change, and immigration will fuel American growth and expansion west. Westward movement will occur in the United States in the post-war period, or the postbellum period, the time after the Civil War ended in the United States. This movement will occur in a region between the Mississippi River and the Pacific Ocean, which, in comparison to the rest of the U.S., had been vastly unsettled at this point in time. In fact, most of the activity we see in this region comes from the American cowboy. The demand for beef had skyrocketed after the Civil War, and so they needed to find a way to move free-range cattle from the south in places like San Antonio, Texas, to railway lines in the north in places like Kansas and Nebraska, so that they could then move the cattle to large cities like Chicago and St. Louis, where meat packing centers existed. Almost as quickly as ranching became big business, the cattle frontier met its end. Overgrazing of the land and extended bad weather were largely responsible. Railroads in the United States, especially in the region west of the Mississippi, will play a huge role in westward migration during the time period after the Civil War. From 1850 to 1871, the federal government will make huge land grants to railroad companies, about 170 million acres, worth about $500 million, to lay track in the West, mostly because the federal government didn't have the funds to do so itself. In the 1860s, two companies will begin a race to lay track. The Central Pacific Railroad will move eastward from Sacramento, California, and the Union Pacific Railroad will move westward from Omaha, Nebraska. Civil War veterans, Irish and Chinese immigrants, African Americans, and Mexican Americans will do most of the grueling labor in completing the first transcontinental railroad. Both companies will reach Utah by spring of 1869, and then those railroad companies will sell some of their land that they've earned through the land grants to farmers who are looking for new opportunities. Some companies successfully sent agents to Europe to recruit buyers to purchase the land, and by 1880, 44% of the settlers in Nebraska and more than 70% of those in Minnesota and Wisconsin were immigrants. Another powerful attraction of the West was the land itself. In 1862, Congress passed the Homestead Act, offering 160 acres of land free to any citizen or intended citizen who was head of the household. From 1862 to 1900, up to 600,000 families took advantage of the government's offer, including several thousand settlers who were exodusters, or African Americans who had moved from the post-Reconstruction South to Kansas looking for new opportunities. In 1889, a major land giveaway in what is now Oklahoma attracted thousands of people. In less than a day, land-hungry settlers claimed 2 million acres in a massive land rush. Some took possession of the land before the government officially declared it open, and because these settlers claimed land sooner than they were supposed to, Oklahoma became known as the Sooner State. Thousands of frontier settlers who moved west faced extreme hardships, like drought, flood, fire, blizzards, locust plagues, and occasional raids by Native Americans. And yet, the number of people living west of the Mississippi River grew from 1% of the nation's population in 1850 to almost 30% by the turn of the century. Establishing a homestead was challenging. Once accomplished, it was farming the prairie year in and year out that became an overwhelming task. And soon, technological advances will take place to help homesteaders farm their land. In 1837, John Deere had invented a steel plow that could slice through heavy soil. In 1847, Cyrus McCormick began to mass-produce a reaping machine that could speed up harvesting and save crops from inclement weather. Other new and improved devices made farm work speedier. By 1890, there were more than 900 manufacturers of farm equipment. In 1830, producing a bushel of grain took about 183 minutes. By 1900, with the use of these machines, it took only 10 minutes. These inventions made more grain available for a wider market. As a result of these new technologies, farming became more profitable. Things like the reaper and the steel plow increased efficiency of production, and new railroad lines linked resources and markets. Some of these new technologies, however, were very expensive, and farmers often went into debt in order to purchase them. By the turn of the century, the Great Plain and Rocky Mountain regions of the American West were no longer unsettled frontier. Farms, ranches, and towns had begun to develop, and because of the population shift west, new states were admitted to the Union. By the turn of the 20th century, all of the states that make up the continental United States, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, were admitted. Unfortunately, forcible removal of American Indians continued during this time period. Native Americans didn't believe that land could be owned, and settlers believed that by owning land or by starting a business, it would give them stake to that land. They argued that the Native Americans had forfeited their rights to the land because they hadn't settled down to improve it. And concluding that the plains were technically unsettled in their minds, migrants who move westward will claim land, and again, forcible removal of American Indians will continue. We have reached the end of our discussion on westward migration. Make sure that you're comfortable understanding why the West was open, how it was opened, the technology that enabled settlers to move west, and the impact that that movement has not only on the United States but on Native Americans as well. The next time we meet, we'll talk about immigration in the early 20th century in the United States and the impact that immigrants will have during this time period. Until next time, and as always, be safe, make good decisions, wear your seatbelt, eat your Wheaties.